I'm W. Curtis Preston, Chief Technologist at Druva, and we're just going to talk. We've already talked about an overview of why we do things the way we do them, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about how. We've already discussed that we do this in the cloud. We run our code natively in Amazon, and this is the reason why, right? When we look at the growth of storage, but you see here that basically the cost of storage is going down faster in the cloud world than it is in the on-prem world. So over time, we do believe that cloud will become even less expensive than it currently is. You've already seen this slide, so I'm going to skip over it. The world is going to SaaS. Let's see here. The advantages of SaaS. So in general, we should be about half the price of the alternatives of the other ways to do things. We've got the world's best security. So we are riding on top of AWS, the most vetted infrastructure provider out there. We are FedRAMP certified. It takes about 15 minutes to deploy us. We do have guaranteed SLAs. Happy to answer any questions on those. And we've already talked about how that basically we have scalability and global reach. Are we in the, so Amazon has the new, what's the new region? It's in UAE somewhere. And what's the new one?
No, we recently launched it on AWS Hong Kong.
Yeah, right. No. I'm talking about there's a new AWS region out there somewhere.
Bahrain.
What's that?
Bahrain.
Yeah. Are we up and running in Bahrain? Do we know? Anyone? Okay, well, somebody does. All right, so not us. And then this idea of unlocking the value of data. We'll talk about that more next. A little bit under the hood. This should be completely autonomous. This is truly a set it and forget it. All of the work that I've done in my career was always the back end. It was always the storage is out of space. The storage is too fast. The storage is too slow. The tapes aren't matched to the disk and all of that. And then it should be, but ours is the opposite of that. It's automatically deployed, automatically managed, no maintenance. We've already talked about source-side global deduplication. We've already talked about auto-tiering of storage. We also offer the hybrid delivery model, which we just discussed, where basically if you do want an on-prem copy of your data, you can do that, and we don't charge you for that. Most of our competitors do charge you for that other copy. We do not charge you for that. We're going to talk about DR. So we offer disaster recovery as a service on top of that, and data governance features, compliance, and also analytics. And when we say we're built natively on AWS, we're going to go into detail of what that means. We are truly built for AWS. We are not just simply software running in VMs running up in AWS. So let's just talk about what the ideal Druva customer is. Right? These are some of our customers. An ideal customer, I would say, would have some of their stuff have started migrating up into AWS. It's not a requirement, but that's definitely an ideal. 70% of their workloads still back on-prem, and heavily virtualized. Obviously, if you're very VMware and Hyper-V focused, you are one of our target customers. And they're also interested possibly in protecting endpoints or SaaS. When you look at the ideal customer, it's going to be a modern virtualized workload. It's going to be so we got this. Have anybody heard this term, the versatilist? Anybody heard this term? It's from the company that tech field day people love to hear about. That the company that starts with a G. I think they came up with the term. It's Gartner. But anyway, but it is the idea of versatilist is that a lot of companies are going away from the specialist model, right? So having all of these different specialties. So the idea is you have a generalist type person. They like the term versatilist. If they have a cloud focus or initiative, then obviously we look really good. If they want to move a workload in the cloud, we are definitely the best way to do that from a data protection standpoint. If they've got some in the cloud, some on the on-prem, if they have distributed workloads, so the more remote offices you have, the more distributed your company is, the better we look, right? Because all of our competitors, you've got to buy a box or a set of boxes in each of those remote sites, and with us, you don't. So the more of those you have, the better we look. And then also if you're a SaaS adopter, and also if you're, and this you can take this two ways. If you're moving away from legacy apps, legacy Unixes, things like that, you're definitely interested in us. The opposite of that, yes, sir.
Yeah, is there support for PaaS offerings? SQL with Cloud?
So give me an example.
Like SQL as a service running in Azure or where? Any transactional level backup support?
So we do have transactional level backup for SQL and for Oracle.
Okay.
Agent-based on-prem, and we're starting to work on that in the cloud.
Okay. Any Active Directory support or plan for?
Yeah, some of our customers back it up as a dump, but today we don't have native support for it, but we are thinking of planning. Yeah.
Okay. And then, who's not our customer? And the first is, if they just have this mentality that they have to have an on-premises backup system, we are not for them, right? Clearly, we are the exact opposite of that. So if they've got the mentality they've got to have a box, then we are definitely not for them. And every once in a while, we get people to push us to have an on-prem solution. We're like, look, there are lots of companies that sell those. If that's what you want, go look at another company.
So, So, for example, AWS is now going to have an on-premises presence. So
yes.
In that situation,
yes.
What do you do?
I'm talking about today.
Yeah, right. Okay. So when AWS comes up, actually makes it live.
I could never talk about something that would possibly be so far in the future, even if it exists or doesn't exist. How's that for an answer? It's going to be a year before that thing ever even ships, and then we'll look at it and we'll see. We don't know. We'll see. Right? Okay.
So, Curtis, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Talking about who's not your customer.
Yeah.
Earlier, you guys were talking about the fact that the large data stuff making, hey, we generate an exabyte in a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
With the amount of data being generated and the amount of data being stored increasing almost at a daily rate,
mm-hmm.
Is there going to be a point where all of a sudden there's just everybody is generating that much data every single day? And how do you deal with that?
So, yeah, that's a great question. I don't think that everyone is going to be doing that. But what I do think is that more and more data will be created in the cloud than in the typical data center. And we're ready for that, right? There we don't have the physics problems that we do have on site. When we start, I don't know if anybody's ever going to get to that, but that everybody's going to get to that scale. I think, and clearly we think as a company, that these giant workloads that might start happening will happen in the cloud. And if they do, we will be there. If they happen on-prem, we bet on the wrong horse.
So the comment about creating exabyte of data a weekend was not necessarily just creating it, but where they're creating it.
Agreed.
So if they create it in the cloud, that's something that you can scale.
We're set. Yeah.
But if they're creating it and then they want to back it up to the cloud, that's where the limitation becomes.
I'll tell you, I've had conversations with Jaspreet on this, and I don't know what that customer would do, right? If they're creating an exabyte of data on the weekend, I literally have no idea how they'll protect that today. I know we won't be able to do it, but honestly, I don't know anybody else that can do it either, right? It is a really difficult problem to solve, and I think it's one of the reasons why that type of workload I think will go to the cloud.
Okay.
Yeah. A good question. Yeah.
On the flip side of that, for customers that have really large on-prem environments, I know for some traditional backup platforms that are out there, there's a lot that you have to do to, you can get a certain amount in without any extra work other than just deploying that initial thing. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you do have to work to design it to be able to function the way that you want it to and perform within your RPOs, RTOs that you have to kind of add compute and add resources to make it perform that way. Mm-hmm. How does that work with your product?
Give me an antidote.
Mike, yeah.
So we actually had a customer that was under a legal hold situation, right? So they were a Phoenix customer, and they were protecting a little over 300 terabytes of source data distributed. And they went in and they changed the retention policy to retain all backups for 2 years. So they put in 365 times 2, whatever that number is, right? 800, 730. Math is terrible. But they put that retention policy on. They got about 8 months into it doing that. We were the usage went up because they actually had a very high change rate as well. The usage on the back end started, it definitely crept up because the change rates were really high and the retention was every day. We got up to, I think, 300 terabytes of source data, about 600 terabytes in the cloud, but logically it was 1.8 petabytes. Any other backup system would have fallen over before it got that big. There was zero impact to performance on the customer end. We were still meeting every day in the backup windows. Backups were happening. We were still transmitting the data, meeting all the SLAs. So the customer saw no impact except for consumption on the back end.
Yeah, and probably 2 slides from now, I'll explain sort of how a little bit of the magic, right? So let's just jump into, sometimes, and I hope the one thing, that if you walk out of here and nothing and get that we are a service, and everybody else is, they sell cars and we're Lyft or Uber or whatever service you like, right? We are a service and they sell hardware and software. But a lot of them market themselves as being in the cloud. So how do they go in the cloud? It's basically what we would call a lift and shift approach, where basically they take whatever it is that's on-prem and they move it into to VMs in the cloud. And you're now running this in your account. You are managing these VMs. You're still managing the OS. You're still managing the software. And most importantly, from a cost and management perspective, you're paying for VMs 24/7, and you're paying for block storage. Neither of those are the case in our system, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Also, again, we go back to target dedupe. Since basically all of our competitors, with a few exceptions, rely on target dedupe, that means that we still need a system here and a system here. Because we use source dedupe, we don't need a system on-prem. We go directly to the cloud. And also, you're still managing the copy process, and you're still managing the backup server OS and all of that.
There's got to be a performance impact of doing source-side dedupe. I mean, that's
so I have a
good part of why you do target dedupe.
Properly written source-side dedupe is faster than anything else, right?
Are you going to expand on that? That's a big statement.
Yeah, so it's a big statement that I'm perfectly fine saying. There are definitely some poorly written source dedupe products that have gone over. I don't want to pick on any one product that have happened over the time. The reason is that the question is there's 2 pieces of source dedupe. So what you do is you chop everything up into a chunk, you create a hash for that chunk, and then you look up that chunk, right? You look that up in a hash table. So there's a little bit of performance impact to create that hash, and then there is some performance to do that lookup. So the way we do it, the second part of that performance part is done in the cloud. The only thing the client has to do is the creation of that hash. Since 99.9% of the time, the creation of that hash is the only thing that is done, and 0.1% of the time, you create a hash and send a chunk back up to the cloud. So with the other sources of software, 100% of the time, they're sending the chunk to the cloud. You follow me? So they're doing the I/O work of transferring 100% of the data, then doing the magic over here. We're doing a little bit of compute work to save a lot of I/O work. So that's why I'm saying, done properly, source dedupe. The problem that most products that I looked at back in the day was actually the back end, not the front end. It was not hurting the client. It wouldn't scale, right? So that's why you see some source dedupe products have target dedupe products right next to them that work together. Trying really hard not to pick on any particular company, but we all know who I'm talking about. So let's just talk about how we do things. And this is where I think this looks really cool. So workloads on this end. This is our AWS account, right? Not your AWS account. So the compute that's running, so we use AWS's automatic load scaling system. So there are 2 things that have to happen. There's the authentication and authorization process, and then there's the storage process, and also the dedupe process. So these VMs are automatically scaling up and down throughout the day in order to meet the current load of backups that are happening. For some reason that we could theorize all day long, we have a big bunch of backups that happen on Monday morning. I have some theories of why that's the case. But that's definitely the case. The thing is, nobody does anything. The system automatically detects the additional backups, automatically scales, which is the answer to your previous question. It automatically scales all that to happen with the authentication and authorization system, with the storage system. Then the configuration services, so things like the, when the backups run and what's connected to what, all that stuff is stored in RDS. But the true, I think, secret sauce here is the use of DynamoDB. So DynamoDB is Amazon's key value pair, infinitely scalable database. And so this is where we store the metadata, which is both the history of all the backups as well as the dedupe index. And this goes back to your question. All of the other dedupe indexes used some sort of hash table that at some point breaks, right? It doesn't break, but it's like things stop performing well when you get to some number, and so you have to buy another one. And so, but with ours, again, we have customers that are double digits of petabytes, and no other dedupe system does that, all in one system with no performance degradation. And it just automatically scales to meet that demand. Then all backups are encrypted in transit using TLS, and encrypted with AES 256 stored in S3, and then automatically tiered into Glacier as the customer asks, okay? Just talk about security for a minute. I talked about this already. Think about the fact that because we're doing source dedupe, every file is actually broke up into little chunks. So every one of those chunks is an object in S3. So one of the biggest parts of our bill is gets and puts. Right? If you just think about how we do things. So, but it's also a great security aspect, because if you go into if you were able to break through all of our various levels of security to get to S3, what you would end up with is a lot of little individually encrypted chunks that you would have absolutely no idea how to put together, because you don't have access to the metadata. Any questions on, because this is the secret sauce here. This is why we're able to expand and meet the demand of any customer without any change on the part of the customer. Yes, sir.
I had a question on the encryption.
Yeah.
Do you guys manage those keys, or is there an option for customer-controlled encryption?
So this is a really long answer that I am not qualified to answer, but I'm going to do my best.
Yep.
So we use what's called envelope encryption, right? Where basically you have a key within a key within a key. The ultimate key that one has to manage is your username and password, okay? And so if you're, and we do have RBAC, so you can have multiple admins with multiple different levels of control. You would never want to have a single admin, because if you had a single admin who forgot his or her username and password, your SOL would be the official technical term, right? Because that is the ultimate key, if you will, okay?
So the customer has control to the console, and you guys manage the rest of the chain,
right,
essentially.
Right, and we don't have access, we don't have any, we don't have any ability at any point to get access to your data in plain format.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
So the cloud service that you provide is a multi-tenant service, all of these customers.
Correct.
How much of what's in the architecture diagram is multi-tenant? Do you spin that up for every customer for each region that they?
So all of this is in every region where we do services, right? And all of this is multi-tenant. How's that?
So one large group of resource that's shared by all customers using that region.
Correct, but that is scaled up and down.
Scaled in and out.
And what's that?
In and out.
In and out. Yeah. Oh, good point. Yeah.
Hey, Curtis, could you expand on the RP0 of...
We haven't got there yet. And by the way, dang it, I forgot to fix the typo. One of those is RTO. Good catch. So it's RTO of minutes, okay. RPO of 0. We haven't got to the DREST part. I just wanted to make sure I answered these questions up here before I get to this.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. But good catch on the typo, though.
I'm just curious here.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that, is Cloud Cache some other technology, or is it so storage gateway? Why didn't you use storage gateway there? I'm just being curious. Is it because DynamoDB, the metadata separation,
yep.
That's what you're looking at? Because that could give you an on-premises quick restore option as well.
Yeah, so this is just the data, right, guys? The metadata is still in DynamoDB, right? This is a custom piece of software just for us. And I think both from a security aspect and also if we leverage some other product, we'd have to pay for it, which means our customers would have to pay for it. This is free of charge.
And the storage gateway doesn't do any of the dedupe and compress at the back end and isn't multi-tenant at the back end. It will be.
Oh yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that the on-premises quick restore type thing.
But that's what this is for. That's what this is for, is the on-premises quick restore.
Oh right, okay.
Right. And we're working on increasing the functionality of this piece of software. That again is no additional charge. Right. Any other questions about? So I think probably one of the best, and I have it on. Actually, it's on the next slide, but I'm going to come back to this slide. I think this story right here is one of the best examples of sort of the scalability of the system. And that is Pfizer is a customer, and they were backing up around 10,000 laptops. And then somebody came to us and they said, CIO's been reading too many articles about ransomware, so we'd like to do all of them. And we're like, how many saw? And they're like, it's like 100,000 or so. And we're like, okay. The hardest part of that job was pushing software out to another 90,000 laptops. The back end automatically scaled to meet the demands of that customer, and magic happened. Live Nation's also a customer. They're a great customer, meaning they use all three parts of our product. And for those of you who don't know what Live Nation is, Ticketmaster. Everybody knows them as Ticketmaster and not Live Nation. But let me go back real quick. But we're gonna DRAS. So he's going to go more in detail, but real quick. The idea is that this is now your account. This is an optional part of the product. And the reason it has to be your account is this is going to be in plain text, right? This is going to be your data restored. So basically, we can restore a copy of your data and bring it up in the cloud as many VMs as you need to do. Save all questions about that because Nav's going to cover this in more detail. And so basically, that's it, right? It should be, and we've had a big push, this fiscal year, which for us started 3 months ago. And that is that we're very much trying to push this idea that we are less expensive than the other ways to do things. And the reason is that, and actually Jesse, when I first came here a year and a half ago, Jesse was the really one that pointed out to me, we are not the first company to try to do things in the cloud, right? To try to do backup in the cloud. What we are is the first company that's figured out the COGS, right? The cost of goods sold. Because of the way we do things on the back end, because of the fact that we automatically scale up when we need that power and automatically scale way back down when we don't need that power. So we're only paying for things when we need them. We're not running a database that isn't used 24/7. We're using RDS. We're not running a storage device that has to be managed. We're using S3, right? So all of those things figure into our COGS, which then we get to pass on to customers.